are going to start our first session today. I hope you got good sleep. And yeah, even though we are sleepy because we had the longest jet lag in this group, so 12 hours. So we will try our best. And yeah, so welcome to the panel, Transnational Mobility and Migration Policies in a Globalized World. This panel explores international migration with a particular focus on migration policies and the experiences of immigrants from South Korea, Japan, and Russia to Germany, Argentina, and Brazil. So we examine intercontinental human movement and its social, historical, and political implications. So my name is You-Kyung Byun, and I am from the Center for German and European Studies at Jung-Eun University in Seoul, South Korea. Today, we will hear 4 presentations, including my own. And our panel will move geographically from Europe with Helene, and to East Asia, and then to South America. So we begin with Helene Henze in her study on Russian elderly immigrants to Germany. Then I will present the study on young South Korean immigrants in Berlin. Next, Professor Dr. Jung-Eun Oh will explain her study on immigration policies for international students in South Korea. And before we start with discussion and Q&A, Dr. Wonjung Min will show us her comparative study on Korean and Japanese immigrants in Brazil and Argentina. Each speaker will have approximately 10 minutes of presentation. And after all the presentations, we will open the floor for discussion and Q&A session with the audience. So now let us begin with our first presenter, Helene Henze. She is a PhD candidate in Eastern European Studies at Ludwig-Maximilians-Universität, München. Her research examines the normalization of life for formerly repressed minority groups in the Soviet Union after 1953 and their Sovietization. Today, she will discuss the migration of elderly ethnic Germans to Germany after the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the integration challenges they face. So please welcome Helene Henze with big applause.
Okay, thank you very much for this kind introduction, and good morning, everybody. I would like first to thank the organizers for this splendid opportunity to present part of my ongoing research, but also to connect with various researchers from across the field. Now, I'm here today to speak to you about Russia-German elderly migration, that is, the migration of older people of German descent from the Soviet Union or its successor states to the Federal Republic of Germany or the unified Germany we all know today. When I speak of older people or singular elderly person, I refer to people over 60 years of age in accordance with the definition of the United Nations. Many of the things that I say today here draw on my research. I have worked extensively with archive documents in all of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and partly in Moscow, and I have conducted 114 biographical interviews with individuals from across the field in various countries. So all I say is bolstered up actually by research. Now, a quick disclaimer, since prior to starting with this topic, I have heard I've had a lot of negative feedback because the group I'm talking about is perceived as, it's a bit controversial. It is being perceived as a group that tends to vote for the far right, for the AfD. And recently, in connection with the Ukrainian war, there has also been a perception and accordingly plenty of news coverage that depicts this group as Putin supporters too. Unfortunately, one must say, because if you look at the statistics, they clearly indicate that the preference for the AfD is there, but in comparison to the general populace, it's only slightly higher. And there's only one major study from Zeus that shows that there is a leaning towards the political fringes, a mild preference, that is to say, among this group. I'd like to caution most people to jump to conclusions too early and to, well, talk in stereotypes. And as to why this perception of Russia Germans is rather blurry is something that I am concerned in my dissertation. Most Germans, I have to say, consider or cannot tell the difference between Russians and Russia Germans, which is due to the Sovietization process that I research and to which these people were exposed prior to their migration to Germany. By Sovietization processes, I mean overall the policies that were introduced in the Soviet period with the intention to homogenize and to erase national markers such as, and not limited to native language, religious belief, and cultural practices. Now, the German minorities were exposed to these efforts since the 1960s. And when you hear me say German minorities, that's not a mistake I'm making, so quick overview. But actually something that represents historical reality. I've brought you a map, and I'm very sorry that it's a bit blurred. But as you can see here on this map, it's a rather curious map because it shows all the historic settlements of Germany in what we now call Eastern Europe or Central Eastern Europe. And as you can see, there are quite a lot of them. It's not only the main group that we all know, the Volga Germans, but then you also have Germans here in the Black Sea region, in what today is Ukraine, what is today the border region between, well, Russia nowadays, formerly Ukraine, and Bulgaria, but also in the Crimea region and of course in the Caucasus region. I've drawn a couple of arrows to point your attention to the fact that we have to go a little bit further back in time if I want to talk about elderly migration, precisely to the year when Nazi Germany started its campaign against the East and the Soviet Union. Now, there's one particular group that was not deported, unlike most Germans in this region, that were taken to the east, to Central Asia and Siberia, which are the Volhynia Germans. These Germans were taken to Nazi Germany. They were naturalized as German subjects of the German Reich. And after the successful, after the demise of the German Reich, there was an agreement between the Allied forces and Stalin that all those naturalized citizens had to be returned to the Soviet Union. Okay. Now, as with most wars, the situation was rather chaotic, and a lot of people simply chose to hide, to change identities, to live in Germany under false identities, or simply to move further west. Now, why is this important? Why am I telling you this? In the context of elderly migration, there's quite an interesting connection, because it is especially those people who stayed in Germany that later on issued invitations to the people, to the German people who then were repressed after 55, after the first Chancellor, Konrad Adenauer, went to Soviet Russia and petitioned for prisoners of war to be returned and families to be reunited. These ties reactivated. That means all the people who were in the West sent invitations to the people in the East, asking them, please come. The life here is much better. Now, for the Soviet Union, this was a major problem, because all those people who had gone through repression would possibly tell about what they had gone through. And of course, there was always the concern that those people would reveal the actual face of communism, which was not as pleasant as it was portrayed on the outside, more or less. So it was only after 75, after the Soviet Union signed the Helsinki Accord, the Helsinki Final Act, and those of you who are political scientists might know the third basket and, the admission of human rights, or the declaration that human rights should be also observed in the Soviet Union, that those migrants, those people those Germans in the Soviet Union were allowed to leave. Now, this is quite an interesting group, because by the time those people were granted the permission to leave the Soviet Union, they were 50 or 60 years of age, right? So by the time they arrived in Germany, they could be considered as elderly migrants. The majority of them were elderly migrants who were met with rather lavish, let me put it that way, cautionary, lavish measures that allowed them to be integrated into society. They received reparations, and their pensions were adjusted to the level of the pensions in the Federal Republic of Germany. Now, these people had few complaints, and this is not primarily the group I will be talking about today, but here's actually the cracker. There was another group, and again, it has to do with the demise or the collapse of the Soviet Union. That policy changed radically after the Soviet Union dissolved. The Soviet Union had only allowed those people to leave who were considered to be family members. With this regulation gone, enormous numbers sought to get to Germany on the basis of ancestry or blood. That was the admission requirement by that time. And recognizing that, taking those people in under the same condition as before, in a freshly united Germany that was ailing at the moment from the burdens that came with the reunification, the policy towards the Russian Germans had to be adjusted necessarily, and was now tied to the Bekenntnis, which is allegiance to German culture, to the German language, and what is called the Aufnahmebescheid, which was a regulation that specifically foresaw that people had to prove certain things in order to be admitted to Germany. Now, this is when you see a second stage of Russia-Germany elderly migration. And I'm not an anthropologist, but this is something I call involuntarily elderly migrations, with many younger people seeking a better life because they had no prospects in the chaos that followed the 1990s in Russia, Kazakhstan, and Central Asia. You might have heard the term ужасные 90-е. They urged the elders to file for permission to return to Germany, which more or less meant that those young people were added to the Aufnahmebescheid, but the elderly had to file it, otherwise no one would be taken in. Now, many people I talked to, especially from this age group, were desperate at the prospect of relocating, being old as they were, leaving behind all they had and all they had worked for since the lift of the special status in ~56, which meant the end of repression. Others said that they only migrated to give their children, and especially their grandchildren, to live a better life, better chances in lives. Now, what you see here is a bit of a collation of both groups. I tried to show what their situation was like once they were in Germany. Now, with the Residence Allocation Act in practice since '89, all people who arrived were taken to the places where their ancestors had originated from. It's a bit complicated in Germany to explain this. Most people lived in the cities, but those who were in the rural areas often had a chance to build or buy houses together with their children and extended family. I have already talked about the pensions, about the adjustments. All those people who came after '92, however, were vastly disadvantaged because their work experience has not been recognized, which nowadays means, unfortunately, and there's an extensive study on that, old age poverty and dependence on social benefits. Now, one of the critical points was the participation in the labor market, and I will talk about this a little bit later on. Most people who arrived after the age of 55 were not employable in the German system, and it was especially women who were affected by their unemployability. The only thing that is repeatedly stressed as being positive in the interviews is the fact that most people had unrestricted access to social services and healthcare from the outset. Exactly, I've talked about the compensation payments. Let me quickly skip that and actually talk about one of the most interesting points that is sadly not talked about too much, which are the adjustment challenges as far as elderly migrants are concerned. Now, one of the major points today that most respondents mention is that their academic qualifications were not recognized, which meant all universities' degrees became void and many exams had to be retaken. Now you can imagine what this means, especially elderly women could not be employed, which mean instead of being doctors, teachers, or economists, well, in this case you understand it, but in the case of doctors, not necessarily, had to move to the lower paid sector and formed what is nowadays termed as an army of cleaners and carers. Those women who actually took the exams, retook the exams, ended up in academic professions, but after a while dropped out. This is what most women tell me, because they could not adjust to what they call the German elbow mentality, the male-dominated science or working environments once you reach a certain level. Another problem that is quite often overlooked is the so-called ghettoification. Now, it's a complicated term because of its history, but what actually is behind it is that smaller communities sought to attract migrants because they received state funding. But what they actually did with the money was to build rather compact settlements that did not offer anything, especially to older people, in the way of social interaction or acquisition of cultural capital. And many people who were plagued by homesickness in these settlements only found refuge in watching Russian language television. And now you see this is the entry gate for Russian propaganda, unfortunately, which stems from all these systemic challenges they encountered. And another factor is rather endemic, is the social exclusion many people experienced. Now, many of the elderly migrants felt that their German was insufficient because they spoke a dialect that they had brought with them, a dialect that was spoken some 200 years ago. And speaking to the native population, they themselves had a feeling that they were being ridiculed or mocked for the way they spoke. So what they did was to increasingly withdraw and self-isolate. Many who tried making contact with their neighbors soon found out that the social interaction codes were rather different. Some families told me that they, in the Soviet Union, they liked to visit their neighbors spontaneously just to chat or, have some tea. And when they tried to do the same thing in Germany, they were rather rejected because in Germany you have to have a social calendar and you have to make appointments for every visit. So they considered their neighbors to be rather unsociable. And one major problem is that many of those over 60 felt offended by false attributions, especially those who had suffered as being, well, what they were called fascists in Soviet Russia. Now they were called Russians, and they were rejected on grounds that I have already explained because they did not really fit in the system given their, Soviet makeup. Let me put it that way. And now just quickly to share or to kind of summarize my results. Now, the majority of Russian Germans felt that their migration had been definitely a positive change, believing it to have led to enhancement of their overall life quality, but the majority of people also felt socially isolated. One reason for that was attributed to the Soviet belief that once you have had children, your social life stops because anything you do from that moment on is dedicated to your children, so you have to kind of push back your own needs. And the only social interaction they experienced was in social clubs, mostly Russian language social clubs, or some of the activities organized by the Association of Germans in Germany, Russia Germans in Germany. Now, one interesting observation, and this is something I would like to add, to end with, is that no one of the people I talked to actually revealed that they rooted for the AfD. Thank you. But several respondents shared that their experience, that they had, especially in the last 2 years, had experienced a new layer of resentment in connection with the war in Ukraine. Because with many Ukrainian, especially younger people from Ukraine, streaming into Germany as refugees, those people saw their Soviet makeup, if I can put it that way, and identified them equally, like the Germans, most interestingly, as Russians. And on that basis, many people say that their experience resentment or even hostility, being called, those of you familiar with the languages, it's a condescending Ukrainian term for Russian people, Moskali. They're being called Moskali, many of them. And that predominantly happens in areas with a large density of migrants where the resources are scarce and, well, the problems or the challenges pile up, like I mentioned before. Okay. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. If you have any questions at the end. Thank you very much.
Can anyone help me to make this as a full screen? I don't know where to press. This is full screen. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Obrigada. Okay, so now I will present my own research on young South Korean immigrants in Germany and their migration motivations within the broader context of neoliberal self-development discourse. So the title of my presentation is Globalized Dreams and Young South Korean Immigrants in Berlin, Germany. So my background is social and cultural anthropology, and the main research method for my study is interviews and participant observation, just for your information. So my paper delves into the experiences of young South Korean immigrants in Berlin, Germany, and their dreams within the framework of the neoliberal ideology of becoming global talent. It explores how youth migration relates to globalization and self-development discourses. Over the past 2 decades, South Korean migration to Germany has nearly doubled. According to the German Federal Office for Migration and Refugees, there were over 22,000 South Korean nationals in 2006, and over 40,000 in 2023. So you can see here on the graph. So this purple color is the total amount of South Korean migrants in Germany. And as you can see, it has been steadily growing. And here the pink color is women, and this orange color is for men. The Overseas Korean Agency, which includes all ethnic Koreans, reports even higher numbers, over 25,000 in 1999. This is the earliest data that I could find. And almost 50,000 in 2023. And both data sets reflect a sharp increase in Korean migration to Germany, with a heavy concentration in the 20s to early 30s age groups. So this is Korean immigrants in Germany according to their age. In 2023, as you can see here, we have a very sharp increase in the age group between 20 to 30. To investigate the motivations and processes behind this youth migration, I conducted interviews with 13 individuals in Berlin in early 2024. To understand the long-term adaptation and the consequences of migration, I focused on long-term residents who have lived in Germany for about 10 years. And in this paper, I present mainly 3 case studies that best illustrate the research objectives. So here I have 3 protagonists, and I'm going to introduce why they migrated to Germany. So case A is a 37-year-old man working as a psychotherapist in Berlin. He moved to Germany in 2005, following his elder sister, and completed his university education there. After graduation, he returned to Korea to complete the military service and begin his career, expecting a better life in Korea due to his overseas degree. However, he faced the barriers in Korea's rigid academic and workplace hierarchies. Because he had not graduated from a prestigious Korean or US American university, and due to the stifling lack of a creative freedom, he described his work life in Korea was more grueling than military service. Yes. Feeling trapped in a hierarchical system, he returned to Germany in 2020. So case B is a 36-year-old woman who studied music in Korea. Unlike most of her peers who went to the US for the further education, she chose Germany due to its relatively lower cost of living. Now she teaches music in Berlin. She finds life in Germany more comfortable and less judgmental in Korea, less judgmental than in Korea. In Korea, she often felt inadequate when compared to peers, for example, for not conforming to beauty standards or wearing luxury brands like Chanel. Although she enjoys her life in Berlin, she avoids contact with the friends and families in Korea to protect her mental well-being. Case C is a 31-year-old university student. He experienced intense competition and social comparison from childhood. So within the same apartment, he had the same age child, and his mother was comparing his performances always with the neighboring child. And that was the reason why he decided to move this country, Korea, when he is a university student. So when he entered the university, during a self-development course, a coach advised him to go global and not limit himself to Korea. He first migrated to China, which he expected to be better, but then he faced also harsh competition there, and then he decided to move to Germany. He still hears about his peers in Korea. They struggle back home, so such as failing exams or being stuck in low-status jobs, which gives him a sense of relief. His ambition in Germany is to become wealthy and buy a house in Germany, a traditional symbol of success in Korean society. Competition, hierarchy, and displays of wealth are all themes central to the Hell-Joseon discourse. So a pejorative term describing Korean society as a modern-day dystopia, reminiscent of the rigid class structures of the Joseon dynasty. So Joseon dynasty is this monarchy before the modern Korean nation. So in such a stratified system, individuals feel trapped in their social class with little hope of mobility. And this Hell-Joseon discourse became like a famous in 2010s. In the whole society was talking about Hell-Joseon. and that has certain influence in out-migration of Korean youth. So I argue that the rise of Heo-Joseon discourse is linked to the transformation of self-development ideals under neoliberalism. So under this neoliberalism, it is emphasized ruthless competition and a winner-takes-all mentality. In this system, young people are expected to act as self-investing entrepreneurs in an uneven playing field. Neoliberalism also promotes cosmopolitanism and the pursuit of global talent status. Many young Koreans engage in mobility programs such as working holidays in Canada and Australia as a means to enhance global competence. Migration thus becomes a form of a detox, a strategy to escape Heo-Joseon while still pursuing personal development. Although similar pressures exist for youth globally, the Korean case is especially stark, reflected in the country's low marriage and the lowest birth rate in the world, and the highest suicide rate in the world. As the case studies show, even abroad, young Koreans continue to compare themselves to peers in Korea. As I introduced you, this case A and B and C, they were still trapped in comparison with their peers in Korea or even in Germany. And case B, the female protagonist avoided contacting even South Korean friends in Germany, in the same city, in Berlin too. So, again, as the case studies show, even abroad, young Koreans continue to compare themselves to peers in Korea and strive for material success, such as a home ownership or luxury goods in Germany. This suggests that they are still embedded in the very ideology they sought to escape. Their dreams remain entangled in the contradictions of leaving their home country while continuing to live under its ideological shadow. So this paper, my paper, highlights how neoliberal ideologies shape young people's aspiration, even in migration. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you. Okay, now next presentation is Professor Jung-Eun Oh. I'm going to introduce her shortly. So, yeah. Professor Dr. Jung-Eun Oh is an associate researcher at CEDES, Center for German and European Studies at Jung-Ang University, and a faculty member in the Department of International Migration and Cooperation at Hansung University. She holds a PhD in political science from the Université Catholique de Louvain in Belgium. She previously worked at the International Organization for Migration, so-called IOM, for 8 years, and has conducted extensive research on international student mobility, demographic shifts, diaspora communities, and highly skilled migration. So today, she will present her study on immigration policies and the social integration of international graduate students in Korea. So please welcome her with a big applause.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to come here. It's my great pleasure and honor to present about my study and share my idea with you, and also have time to discuss with you. As Dr. Byun introduced about me, I study in many issues about migration issue, and especially student migrant. Today, I will say about student migration into Korea. So many young Koreans like to go outside, emigrant, but many young foreigners also want to come to Korea. So my subject is about the foreign migrant into Korea. This my study is entitled Study on Social Integration of International Graduate Students in STEM, Science, Technology, and Engineering Mathematics fields in the Republic of Korea. The ROK means South Korea. So why I did study about it? It's because of growing social demand to retain, it means maintain the international student after their graduation. It's driven by the low birth rate and aging society in the Republic of Korea. And many experts emphasize that we have to utilize the young student, foreign student, after their graduation as a high-skilled people, especially the student with a STEM graduate degree for high-skilled science and technology talent. Also, Korean government also agree such opinion, and they made many new law and system. And recently, they also introduced a fast-track system. It's a little complicated, but if I make it in short, it's give the permanent residency very easily. In general, some foreigner who want to get obtain the permanent residence in Korea, they have to live more than 5 years. But for the STEM field graduate student, they can get the permanent residency of around 3 years. It's more shorter. And also, we allowed the multiple nationality. But it's through the evaluation, it's a kind of point system. But it's very special it's a very special system. But the problem is many of the STEM students in Korea, the foreign students, cannot communicate in Korean very well. In other fields like humanities and social science, the government asks to study Korean language before enter the university. But STEM field is also different, because if we also ask them to study Korean language at first, maybe we cannot attract many intelligent scientists. So we just allow to study in English, especially top-level university. I said top level because in Korean university system, we often call it a very hierarchical system. We have the level. So especially the high-level university just teach in English for the STEM field, and the student, really intelligent student, don't think about the Korean language, the barrier of language. They just can come to Korea and they can study as a scientist. So they are really limited language proficiency. So that means they can study, they can be a good scientist, but the problem, when they graduate, the Korean company hesitate to employ them, because the Korean people are very hesitate to communicate with them in English, because it's not easy, they are very uneasy. So to make it better, I studied, and this is my a little huge study, but today I present about the research result focusing on the student, the international student part. I survey and also a focus group interview with international student who enrolled in the STEM field, the master and doctoral program at top 10 university in the ROK. I think it's not a good idea to give the university name, because each year the level is a little changed, but I said top 10 university because if we just say the university student, graduate student, we cannot guarantee they are really good student, so I said it's a top level. and I survey. I carried out from September 4th, 2023. So my study was carried out to 2023. So from the beginning of September until the middle of October, and it was online questionnaire, and I got the valid response more than 800. For master, it's more than 200, and for doctoral student, it's more than 500. And I said here, integrated program, it means integrated program with master and doctor. So it means graduate level. And for focus group interview, I try to listen more carefully, not only just the questionnaire, but I want to listen their own mind. So it was also carried about August and November in 2023. And it was a face-to-face interview with the people. Average duration was about 2 hours, and the participant was 32 person from 25 countries. It means I tried to listen tried to listen to each different opinion from each different country. So just one or two person from one country can listen their tell their idea, and I try to collect very variety idea from all over the world, but not all over, but 25 countries, the main country. The result. At first, I asked them why they come to Korea for study, so motivation for studying in Korea. The more than 50% say because of a scholarship opportunity. The Korean government give the scholarship for foreign STEM field students, really a lot of scholarship. For most of STEM field students get the scholarship from the Korean government or from the university. And they also say it's a relatively low cost of studying abroad because Korea is already developed country, but the Korean government allowed the student to have a part-time job when they study. So they said, even it is a developed country, the living cost is not so high because they can get money in a lab or also in outside the university. And they also said some their peers and some relatives, acquaintances recommend about study in Korea. And some of them also thought if they graduate from Korean university, they can get the job more easily, especially in a big Korean company like Samsung, LG, Hyundai, etc. And I also asked them why, if they have, if I ask about their friend, if they have a good relationship with Korean or just they met their own, the same, the friend from the same country. Many students said they mainly meet the student from the same country, and also it's a frequency order. So the biggest part, they said they mainly met the student from the same home country. And also, and the next one is they said they met many other, many students from other country, but mainly foreigner. And also, there was also student, they met many Korean students, they have good, very close Korean friends. And also and there are also some people, they have no particular distinction in choosing friend. But I just make a short here, but I didn't show the detailed statistic, but one thing interesting, there was some difference between the regional, their origin, I mean the regional tendency. The Northeast Asian and the Central Asian student prefer to meet the friend from the same home country, but means China, Japan, and Central Asia like Uzbek, Kazakh, but the South Asian like Indian and the European, North and Latin American students have no difference. It means they're comfortable with diverse friendship without any distinction. So it was a little different from their original country and original region. And I asked them if they have one or more Korean who met very closely. More than 60% have yes. It means at least one Korean friend they have, and about 37.4% have no. So they don't meet. They just meet between Korean. And I asked them what they want to do when they graduate. It means their plan immediately after graduation. More than 50% wanted to get a job in Korea. And then about 30% said they wanted to return to their home country. And the others say they want to get a job, but it's not in Korea, nor in their home country, but another country. One thing interesting, someone who wanted to go on the third country is not means a developed country, but another country. They said at the beginning, before they come to Korea, they prepare to go to the United States to study, but they cannot get the scholarship, so they come to Korea. But when they graduate, they wanted to get a job in the United States. So United States was a very their dream destination. So they said they want to go another country after graduation. But more than around 50% wanted to get a job in Korea, in Korean company. But the difficulty, the challenge in getting a job in Korea is a lack of Korean language proficiency. They can learn a lot in Korea, but they study only in English, so they cannot communicate fluently in Korean. Many of them really don't study the Korean, and they also insufficient about the information about Korean company. And some of them also say about their visa problem, because when they are student, they have the student visa. With the student visa, they also can work as a part-timer. But when they finish their study, we also have some job searching visa with we say the D10 visa, but it's not long-term visa. So because of visa problem, if they cannot get a job before graduation, they worry about it. So this is my study, and in my study, I suggest some how can we do if we want to utilize or if we want to help the international student to get a job and to use the international student in Korea. So some government part and the university part, and as the student role, I suggest another thing. But here, today, I didn't want to say about some special situation in Korea. I just discussed some more universal idea. I put some 3 questions for discussion. We can talk more about it. Just I briefly say what I really want to listen from you is to attract more intelligent and talented students. The Korean government don't ask for the STEM student to study Korean. It's a kind of barrier. But because of Korean language, they have difficulty to get a job, even they graduate from the university. So I think what could be better to make a basic Korean language learn, make a mandatory course could be good or not. So it means the student, without any obligation, the student don't study. So if we ask them to study Korean, a kind of obligation, it could be good or not, I don't know. And then I said many intelligent foreign students get a scholarship. Most of STEM field students get a scholarship when they study. But sometimes it raises equal equity concern with the local student, because for the local student, it's not easy to get a scholarship, but for foreigner, they can get the scholarship. So to attract international student, it could be, desirable or not? I cannot find a very good answer. And the third one, third one is a little complicated. What kind of support from the host country's government or university would be effective in helping the international graduate secure job after graduation? Okay. This was my study, and today I want to share and I want to listen your opinion. Thank you for your attention.
So last but not least, we have our fourth presentation. And after Dr. Wonjung Min's presentation, we will have a floor open. We will all come to the stage and open the discussion session with the audience. So now we are turning to Dr. Wonjung Min. Dr. Min is an associate researcher of CEDES in Seoul, and a researcher at the Asia Center at the Seoul National University. Also an associate researcher at the Asian Studies Center of Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. Her work focuses on the Asian diaspora in Latin America, and she is currently exploring Korean fandom in Spanish-speaking countries, so to speak K-pop, right? So today, she will present her research on the planned immigration of Koreans and Japanese to Brazil and Argentina, framed in historical context. So please welcome Dr. Min with big applause.
Okay, good morning. Today I will be presenting a comparative study titled The Light and Darkness of Planned Immigration, Comparison of Korean Japanese Immigrants in Brazil and Argentina. And as the final presenter on this panel, I'd like to talk about the Korean and Japanese diasporas as presented, and communities that often live on the opposite side of the globe from the Asia and are frequently mistaken for Chinese chinitos within the broader discussions of globalization. So today I will briefly present only the outline, but I have no doubt that your feedback will contribute to the completion of the final paper. So let me begin. And the study examines how state-led migration shaped the settlement and identity outcomes of Koreans and Japanese diasporas in Latin America. Focusing on Brazil and Argentina, it explores how government policies, how host countries' recession, and transnational strategies shaped very different trajectories for these two communities. While the issues faced by immigrant diasporas may be similar across the world, the communities in regions that are geographically, culturally, and psychologically distant inevitably develop their own unique characteristics. And although both groups arrived through agricultural element programs, their long-term experience diverged sharply. Although their migration began in the analog era, globalization and the development of the internet have brought new dimensions to the experience of overseas diaspora. Globalization has stimulated the movement of people in the world, but at the same time, it has strengthened civic and racial forms of nationalism. And since COVID-19, universalism has disappeared and anti-globalization movements have occurred, resulting in a more ethnographic or ethnocentric and nation-centric bias than before. Nevertheless, the movement of people inevitably happens, and in the chaotic international situation, the issues of immigration and refugees are no longer limited to just one particular country. While the two other Korean colleagues spoke about the young Koreans who are eager to go abroad, in my case, it was the social unrest in 2019 in Chile and the outbreak of COVID-19 that made me want to leave Chile. However, that didn't necessarily mean that I wanted to return to Korea, but anyway, I'm in Korea now, in any case. However, globalization and the internet have allowed me to remain connected with Latin America. And this personal experience is what led me to take an interest in geographic, cultural, and psychological movements of people. And Japan launched the large-scale agricultural immigrations to Brazil after World War II. It doesn't mean that Japanese didn't move to Latin America before World War II. It has long history. And then in the case of Japan, after the World War II, partnering closely with the Brazilian state. These migrants formed rural colonies that eventually grew into stable and politically recognized communities. I'm sure that some of you might have read the book Brazil Maru. And in the case of Korea, follow a similar path in the 1960s, sending migrants to both Brazil and Argentina. But unlike Japan, Korea's programs lacked sustained state support and often relied on private brokers. As a result, Korean migrants faced more precarious conditions and greater mobility across regions. And Brazil and Argentina presented different host country contexts at the same time. Brazil was racially diverse and actively supported Japanese agricultural migrants. Argentina, on the other hand, upheld the Eurocentric national identity and did not welcome Asian migrants until Cold War labor needs aligned with Korea's diplomacy. And Japanese migrants in Brazil built a strong institutional and maintained a high cultural visibility through media, schools, and festivals. Meanwhile, Korean migrants, especially in Argentina, moved quickly from rural to urban economies, often in textiles and small businesses. Religious institutions, particularly Protestant churches, became the backbone of Korean migrant communities. The study uses transnationalism and flexible citizenship as key theoretical frameworks. Japanese Brazilians developed a circular migration with Japan and retained the community cohesion. Korean migrants exhibited flexible citizenship, relocating again, often to the US or South Korea, especially after crises like COVID-19 or economic downtowns in Argentina. So what explained the divergence? One, Japan's state-led migration included long-term institutional support. Korea's did not. Two, Brazil's policies encouraged permanence, while Argentina's instability led to Korean out-migration. Three, migrant agency shaped adaptation. Churches, networks, and mobility were crucial, especially for Koreans. After Korean War, South Korea's government encouraged overseas immigrations to solve food and unemployment problems caused by overpopulation. The first formal immigration organized by the government began with establishing diplomatic relations between Korea and South America countries in the 1960s. Japan has established an immigration system to alleviate the sudden increase in population after World War II, and Latin America is home to the largest population of Japanese outside of Japan, including both first-generation immigrants and their descendants. Research has been conducted domestically and internationally on the continent's established Japanese community, which has successfully integrated into the social and economic mainstream of the local societies. Korea imitated Japan's immigration policy, but its immigrants in South America, by contrast, endured difficulties, including the risk of deportation, because they violated agreements that did not engage in agriculture. And this study compares the experience in Latin American countries of immigrants from Korea and Japan who adopted similar policies. They yield different results. According to a Japanese friend with experience working at JICA, Japanese International Cooperation Agency, The Japanese government felt a sense of guilt and responsibility toward its compatriots living in Latin America after World War II. In contrast, since Korean immigration to Latin America took place after the Korean War, Korean immigrants had few opportunities to actively out-contribute to their homeland. For most Koreans, Latin America was not their final destination from the moment they arrived. In the case of Japan, many who migrated were individuals seeking to escape Japanese society in search of a new world. And combined with government support for settlement and the post-war context, the circumstances were conducive to fully establishing themselves in the local communities. Latin America is an area that experienced the political colonization by Spain and Portugal, among others, and cultural domination by Europe. Korea was a political colony of Japan, but its post-colonial cultural sensibilities are different from those in Latin America. In this vein, this presentation comparing Korea and Japan can also be of interest to study of the relationship between Europe and Latin America. Although further research is needed, it seems that since the 20th century, especially in recent years, the South Korean government's policy toward the Korean communities in Latin America has focused on strengthening their unity and helping them maintain their Koreanness, Korean identity. In contrast, Japan's approach appears to have centered on supporting initial settlement with the goal of enabling communities to establish themselves independently over time. I couldn't cover everything in this short presentation, but the immigration of Koreans and Japanese to Brazil and Argentina is a complex, significant historical phenomenon with a lasting impact on Brazil and Argentina. In sum, migration policy alone does not determine diaspora outcomes. It must be matched by institutional support, host country openness, and transnational strategies. I hope this comparative study offers valuable lessons for current migration policy debates, especially in context of South-South mobility, racialized reception, and global citizenship. Thank you for your attention.
So please still stay in this room. So we are going to have a discussion with the audience. Okay, I'm going to sit here. So we have only 2 microphones. So we will share one, and the other one I will bring to the audience, whoever has questions. Oh, yeah. So the floor is open. If you have any questions, just please raise your hand. I'm going to the Professor Dax first.
Yeah, thank you very much for all these wonderful presentations. It was really very interesting. I have actually a common question about the aging Russian-German migrants. You referred briefly to the media consumption. You certainly know the study, I guess, of Nelly Elias coming home, where she compared Jewish Russians coming to Israel and German Russians coming to Germany, and their differences in belonging and getting integrated. And she examined the media angle on that. And I can imagine, while in Israel they were much more consuming Israeli media and also Israeli media in Russian, which led to more integration. In Germany, they continued with Russian media consumption much more, and I just can imagine, the study was from the 90s, right now, with all, I mean, the AfD, you were pointing to that, just imagine getting all this Russian media news, fake news, attacks, that this might have just increased completely, and this with aging also, when you're more socially isolated, being more on media, how this might impact in a dramatic way even their isolation, or even their belonging to somewhere else.
Yes, thank you. This is a very valuable comment. A lot of studies indeed have undertaken the comparison between the so-called Kontingentflüchtlinge in German, which are Soviet Jews who were taken into Germany and Russia-German migrants.
No, actually, she compared not the
Yeah.
contingent flüchtlinge to Germany,
I
compared also
understand.
going to Israel.
Exactly.
Yeah, but then the
Exactly, and this is a very valuable comment. Again, I totally agree that media consumption might be quite different, but then I'd also suggest to look at the fact that Israel's way of taking in migrants is completely different from Germany. The integration programs are set up are completely different, and the people that arrive have quite a different identity. Being taken in as Jews is quite different from being taken in some sort of foreigners that claim to be returning to a home country, which they then find out is actually not their home country anymore. And of course, among many people, not only the elderly, there unfortunately is this perception that the media, the Russian media, is giving them some sort of truth that is not being told by German state television, which then again increases the belief in what they're being told by the channels that are now blocked, fortunately. But those who are hooked on that kind of propaganda, of course, keep watching via VPN connections. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your presentations, which were, I agree, very interesting. I loved particularly some aspects that I will mention. But first, a doubt concerning the first intervention. I'm not sure to have understood the negative feedback that you received, that your research received. So I would like you, you had mentioned to have received negative feedback concerning your research, and I didn't understand the criticism made, or maybe I understood and am kind of perplexed with it. Well, so could you explain it better? I particularly appreciated very much the displacement of regard that your research made, that you made in your research, to friendship. I do not study migration, but in my superficial point of view is that it seems to be neglected as a topic, and it's something fundamental to existence. So it was more a common. I adored your research on neoliberal self-development, subjectivity, and it made me understand a sort of capital colonial dimension, and as in sort of infusion on the subjectivity, on the infusion on the being of a scale of superiority and inferiority, whereas superiority is corresponding to capitalist subjectivity with symbols from the north, symbols of power, like Chanel you mentioned, and inferiority, producing extinction for those who cannot cope, for those who resist. So I would like to know, what do you think of this interpretation, if you agree with it or not? And you mentioned, I adored also this regard on this migration, and you had mentioned K-pop phenomenon at the beginning of a presentation, but I think you didn't mention it during it. So could you get back to this aspect? I am a K-pop fan, so I am interested in this aspect.
Por favor. Well, yeah. Actually, while I was in Chile, in 2012, as I remember, one of the K-pop group held concerts in Chile and Peru. And all of the Korean media said that at the boom of K-pop in Latin America, for them, Latin America is one nation. So, and I was invited to talk about the K-pop's popularity in Chile, but I'm not such a good Koreans. So I said the truth, and according to my in-situ observations, most of the fans are young adults, teenagers, who belong to middle lower classes, and that it bother that my words bother a lot, including the funding institution like Korea Foundation. Yeah, and still there I decided to show evidence. So I'm a humanist, but I started collaborating with the social scientists and residing in North America. So I went to the K-pop, like in the most Latin American K-pop fans do cover dance. So every weekend I used to go to the park and Centro Cultural Gabriela Mistral where they dance, and I interview them. And you know, like the Pontificia Santa Católica de Chile is a very elite white university. It was not easy to find K-pop fans, but I started finding them. So I did like hundreds of K-pop fans, and in the end, when I see the students' face at the first class of the semester, I can see you like K-pop, you are otaku, you like anime, you watch a drama. I can read their faces. Yeah. And the thing is that, like, there I found that there's strong Eurocentrism and Chinoism, as I mentioned in my papers. Like in South Korea, especially, South America, especially Southern Core, and they have strong Eurocentrism. They feel Westerners, and culturally Western culture too still is Latin America, and then geographically very distant. Chinitos are all Asians too. So according to my interview, they have strong different characteristics of K-pop fandom in North America or East Asian countries, and all happens thanks to internet. And then they're at the same time they have a strong division between otaku fan and K-pop fans. At the same time, they share the fandom. At the same time, they differentiate each other. And then all the LGBT issues and or the social class, render, race, gender, and classes in Latin America, I could find them through the interviews, and then I published the papers. And nowadays, like many Korean entertainment companies like HYBE, the father of BTS, are recruiting Latin American boys and girls to make K-pop Latin American band. And also last year, as I remember, one of the Korean companies launched the K-pop girl group with the Peruvian girls. Kissing and Ball or something, right? You can find on the internet. And while back to Korea, now I'm doing the opposite. Now, like I was a Chinita in Chile, I was a strange Latina Korean in Korea. So there I became to have interest in how people live in different worlds, moving around the world, and then how Korean society or South Korean society see and consume and receive Latin American society. There I started this research. Well, actually it lacks the in-depth interviews with the people, but I'm at the first stage, and it's like with the literature review, etc., etc. If you have more questions about K-pop and otaku culture in Chile, I can show you. I can send my papers. Thank you.
Okay, I also quickly respond. I think this is maybe a misunderstanding. What I actually said is that it's not exactly my research that meets a lot of negative feedback, but rather the fact that I deal with certain subjects which are perceived negatively. So whenever I say I research Russia Germans, you know, people are, oh, that's the people who vote for the AfD. So what is there to research? So, you know, stereotypes come out fairly quickly, and that's one thing I want to point out here also.
So if I understood correctly, the thing is there are good topics to study which are morally accepted by academia and that correspond to their ideological view of the world or preferences, and bad topics and far right electorate is a bad topic. Is that one?
Well, I don't quite share the view that there are bad topics and good topics to research, morally bad or good topics. But we all know about discourses and how discourses move and switch and develop. And right now, researching the Russia Germans is a bit, well, not en vogue, if you want it in French. That's the only thing I wanted to mention.
Sorry, Willie, I thought your question towards me was towards Helene. Could you please repeat again? I think you had a question on my presentation, right? Yeah, could you please repeat?
Yes, by the data you highlighted on a sort of consequence of this neoliberal self-development subjectivity in Korea has been suicide, one of the highest suicide or migration or attempts to escape. I wondered if could it correspond to a sort of colonial capitalism of the being, installing superiority and inferiority of existence inside of human being, in this sense of producing extinction of people led to consider themselves as inferior.
I think you summarized my thoughts really well now. So I think it's it's surely reflected. Yeah, and I think it's a really big topic that you just mentioned. Yeah, so neoliberalism and capitalism and how it drains people's lives, and in particular for young people. Yeah, because we have been heavily industrialized since the 70s and 80s in South Korea. And we had actually good economies till, I would say, beginning of 2000s. But now, what younger generation face in the society is completely different than what the others, or not others, the parents' generation faced in their youth. So that also provokes a kind of misunderstanding between generations. And these young people, they have difficulties in Korean society, but at the same time, they have a pressure from the society that they have to be successful. And being successful means economically wealthy and highly educated, good education. And if you have broader degrees, you're well educated, and you have transnational experiences, and that's why people go abroad. Yeah. So I understand my study in that kind of context, and yeah, it's also related to me. And when I think my past, and I migrated to Germany because I was also kind of influenced by this neoliberal ideology of who I need to become in the future. So yeah, I hope that helps to understand my study. So next questions. Yeah.
I have different things for different people. For you, I would like to know what are the general. I mean, is there a generalized reaction to the relatives that are in Korea? Do they appreciate that they emigrate, or do they think it's a loss, or do they think it's a sign of success that they emigrated? So what's the? We only heard about the people themselves, but not about the reaction. I quickly go to the others. I would like to know, have you studied any? Sorry, it's for you. No, have you dealt at all with the Russian Jewish immigration? Because it's very interesting what's happened in Jewish communities in Germany, which tend to be very small, and a lot of them now have a lot of Russians, and there's quite a conflict between the Jews who were there before and the Russian Jewish immigrants, which turn the community into some Russian folk club, and like whatever. I mean, so that would be an interesting aspect if that was also dealt with. And we should have a little talk later, because DAD now has exactly. I mean, in Germany we have exactly the same problem with integrating foreign students into the labor market. We actually have a very big program now trying to support the universities in opening up the labor market for the students. And the newest program that we're working on is one where we try to integrate German into the English language programs, and what that means for the university, what that means for the curriculum, because it has to be mandatory, but how does it fit into the curriculum? So we're actually facing the same issues and working on several programs. Maybe we can do that on a bilateral basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. So, you know, I think the image, public image of Germany and Korea plays a significant role why people choose to come to Germany. And Germany has been having quite a positive image in Korean society in general since very long. So, you know, in 1960s and 70s, many Korean guest workers arrived in Germany. And people have this kind of image of Germany as a rich and Western and industrialized country. And still, I think that image continues nowadays. And people, instead of, when they can't manage to go to the States, the second option is then Germany, which has kind of image of being successful and studying in Germany, and German products has also good reputation. I think that's why people decide to come to Germany. And among the relatives and friends, Germany, I still think that has a good reputation. Yeah, so it's not like they don't feel like a loss. Yeah, they think migration to Germany as being successful, and that's why these young people try to remain in Germany and giving good image to their relatives and friends back in Korea. So, yeah.
Okay, let me also quickly answer your question. Well, I'm not an anthropologist, so the questions you raise would be ideal for somebody to investigate who is into anthropology. Unfortunately, I have to say I'm a historian, so I look into the past and I work with sources. But I have started in a project that now is almost finished, Ambivalences of the Soviet. And my partner, more or less PhD, researched exactly these aspects. So he was looking into Russian Jewish integration, and Daniel Gebel, I think he might finish his dissertation soon as well, and he'll be presenting his results on this. What I can say now is there some sort of a thinking that those who came before were more advantaged than those who came later among Russian Germans? For sure, but it's not as strongly expressed, because when the majority came, people rather had this mentality, everyone is fighting for themselves. So a little bit of elbow mentality among the Russian Germans as well. Most people did not establish contacts with those who had been there before, and those who came earlier, their identity or their self-identification as Russian Germans is far less established. So they consider themselves to be more German than those who came later. So there's hardly any interaction between them, unfortunately. And those who do interact, for example, within the Landsmannschaft der Deutschen, so the associations of Russian Germans in Germany here, they tend to be rather mentor figures. So it's some individuals who provide some guidance, but it's not the majority of them. And from what I have witnessed when I were at these events, those people are rather treated with respect rather than, you know, considering them to be somebody who did better than the rest.
Okay. Yeah. Frankly to speak, the Korean government consult a lot the German cases. When we make the visa policy and the new law, new immigration law, we study a lot about German cases, because German also have many experience, but a little before than Korea. And in Korea, when you think about the immigration and immigrant, it's very new subject. And until the 1990s and until the early 2000, many people didn't think about the immigration. When you say migration, many people thought emigration. The Korean went to another country. But since 2005, exactly, 2005, Korea became net immigration country. So now, every year, more and more foreigners come to Korea, and many Koreans also thought the immigrant is a kind of a human resource. We have to utilize well, and we also have to integrate them in our country, and especially if they are very high-skilled people, high-skilled person. We think we have to maintain them, but sometimes it makes also side effect. As I said, many Koreans also think to attract the high-skilled foreigner by the government, driven by government, the Koreans think is a kind of reverse discrimination. So these days, many advanced countries have some same problem, share the same problem like low birth rate, and they need more human being, more people, especially some intelligent people. And so the Korean government also asked the researcher to research more and more, and today I show you, but I wanted to do more comparative study, but the comparative study is not the answer because Korea has also some special, some original situation. It means many Koreans are very afraid to use the European languages. So even German is not English-speaking country. Many German can speak easily communicate easily in English. But in Korea, even the professor teach in English outside the university. Many Koreans don't speak in English. So it is a little different situation, and we learn from other country, but we cannot find our answer yet. So we already try to do something better solution. Okay.
So we have 3 more minutes. We may be able to accept 1 or 2 more questions. Okay.
Thank you. I have a small question for Professor Min. If I understood correctly, you mentioned at the beginning of your talk that the Japanese migration mainly began after the World War II. But as far as I know, the number of the immigrants to Brazil was far greater before the World War II. And could you explain what did you mean by saying so?
Yeah, thank you for your question. As I mentioned briefly, the Japanese immigration to Latin America, mainly Brazil, started long time before. But in the South Korean government, the Latin American, like an immigration to Latin America, was the first official immigration to foreign countries. And then there, like a South Korean government didn't look at the history, as I understood. For them, the most recent case were World War II, and then Japan started official agriculture immigration. So South Korean government exactly imitated the policy. But in the case of Japan, Japanese government very officially and they strongly support the Latin American immigrants. When I went to Kobe, I had a chance to visit the Kobe Museum, and then there it showed all the first establishment and utilities to go to all kinds of maru, the ships. In the case of South Korea, instead of South Korean government, the government used the brokers, the private brokers. So South Korean government, they didn't have exact information about Latin America. That's the different first step, as I know. I've been reading a book about the first Japanese immigration to Latin America long time before World War II. So it was so interesting case for me. So there I understood how Japanese people could establish in Latin American countries and then became the most important Japanese diaspora. Yeah, in the case of Korea, the Koreans went to Latin America without knowing any of agriculture. So they escaped, they violated the regulations. That's why they have faced so many cases of deportation. And then, so that makes the quite big difference, as I know. And then I would like to interview some people of JICA, about the guilty and responsibility of the Japanese government. And then at the same time, returning immigrants are also different. In the case of Japan, they need labor, so that's why they try to receive the Nikkei Brazilian, Nikkei Peruvians. In the case of South Koreans, they left any kind of local countries when for example, in Argentina had the economic crisis, they left Argentina and moved to Brazil and moved to Korea and then came back to Latin America. So Professor Kyung Byun of UCLA called that like rhizomatic diaspora or floating diaspora. So that's the case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, we're actually having reached the end of the panel, but do you have any questions that you wish to be discussed more? Or if you have more questions, you can of course approach us personally in the coffee break. So thanks for your attention and motivation to ask questions. Okay, thank you very much.